And on Saturday morning, we woke up to the news that the president withdrew from the convention in the middle of the night. So I'll just give a very brief context about the convention and about the debates around the convention, especially in the last couple of months. It is a regional convention to prevent and combat violence against women and domestic violence. And Turkey was the first country to ratify the convention in 2011, which meant that it committed to preventing male violence, punishing the perpetrators, protect and support women against violence. Withdrawing from the convention has been talked about for a while now, and women and LGBTI movement have been campaigning against it and calling the government to fully implement it, as opposed to withdrawing from the convention. So the news of the withdrawal came as a shock, especially because it was done by a presidential decree undermining the legislative power of the parliament. And this is a decision made solely by Erdogan himself rather than a parliamentary legislation or legislative process, which should be the way of withdrawing from an international convention. And what makes it even more horrifying is that this withdrawal came at a time when femicide and other forms of violence against women and LGBTI are on the rise in the country. Turkey does not keep official records of femicides, but civil society organizations monitor it closely. And this is an estimation done by civil society that it tripled in the last 10 years. Only this year, which has not even been full 3 months, 78 women are known to be murdered or died under suspicious circumstances, which could be a suicide. That doesn't seem like a suicide. Which brings me to the main security problem for the women in Turkey. And I would say it is to survive in a country where femicide has been tripled in the last 10 years and the impunity against the perpetrators of violence against women has prevailed. This has already been the case for some time, but the withdrawal created even a stronger frustration and despair. Many women and LGBTI feel like they are explicitly and purposefully left open to dangers by the government, and there is literally nothing they could rely on. Only yesterday, 2 days after the president's decision to withdraw from the convention, 4 women were killed by men. Alongside this whole context of increasing violence against women, the government and the government-supported media have been targeting LGBTI in Turkey. So this went hand in hand by rising hateful rhetoric against the LGBTI community by representatives of high-level religious and political institutions, as well as actions and legislation attacking human rights defenders and civil society organizations. And this got worse, especially in the last year. In parallel to this, trans women also have been victims of hate crimes committed by men. And the hateful rhetoric against LGBTI is manifested also in the campaigns against Istanbul Convention, because many conservatives would say that the convention undermines Turkey's traditional family structures, and we are used to this discourse from many other countries right now. And this is the main reason why they support the withdrawal, although they don't really know anything about the content of the convention. There were even some videos with random people on the street, and they were asking these people why they would or what they think about the convention. And some of them were like, I don't know much about the convention, I haven't really read it, but I support it because it was really, really against our values. So this was the official discourse about the convention, that it supported LGBTI rights and it undermined our traditional values. So it was against the family structure. An important argument was that convention promotes homosexuality because it is based on the principle of non-discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation. Even as a response to international critics, such as the one from Biden or from the EU, the Turkish presidency's Directorate of Communications issued a statement, I think it was yesterday, indicating that the convention was hijacked by a group of people attempting to normalize homosexuality, which is incompatible with Turkey's social and family values. And this is the first time that such statement is present in an official document. this is not to say that the ideology of the government has changed, but they weren't doing these things this explicitly. So I will conclude this round by saying that it is important to keep in mind how anti-LGBTI discourse is used by the state to legitimize its withdrawal from the convention, and also to notice how violence against women and LGBTI is fueled by the same heteropatriarchal norms that the government uses to consolidate its power. Saying that women and LGBTI movement are one of the most vibrant and really powerful social movements, especially in current Turkey. And they always strike back, especially in recent years under this shrinking space for civil society and under an increasingly authoritarian regime. Women's movement is the one who, despite the risks, still takes to the streets and organizes massive protests. And I would say 8th of March rallies, especially in recent years, have been the main source of hope for many in the middle of this very oppressive context. And women's movement is quite quick in their responses to government's actions. They organize social media campaigns or synchronize demonstrations in different cities. And this is what happened last Saturday as well. After we heard the news about the withdrawal from the convention, many women took to the streets across the country with the demand for the president to reverse his decision to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention. And one of the slogans that stand out was, "We are not scared, we are not afraid, we shall not obey." And I think this is very telling. This is exactly what they have been doing in the last years. And apart from the recent withdrawal from the convention and the debates around that, I'd like to say also a few words about women's peace activism and how it has changed over recent years, because I think it is also very much related to this shrinking civic space and how it's changed the activities of the women's organizations. So there was a peace process between the Turkish state and Kurdish armed forces between 2012 and 2015. And during that process, especially Kurdish women peace builders and feminist activists from all over the country mobilized to ensure that peace talks represented their experiences and that their participation was effective. But following the collapse of the peace process in 2015, women peace builders, activists, and civil society organizations working on gender equality have been targeted severely by the government, and this targeting took several forms. For example, many women Kurdish politicians, mayors, and activists who have been actively involved not only in peace-building activities, but also activism against violence against women, were imprisoned, and most of them are still in prison, or they had to leave the country, so they can't actively take part in activism inside the country. And government's attacks also took the form of shutting down grassroots women's organizations, especially in different Kurdish populated cities. Among those closed by the central government were 2 of the 4 women's shelters run by Kurdish municipalities. And their services would be more crucial than ever during the pandemic because many women had to stay home where they were not safe at all. Their continued operation could have meant better services and protection for many women and LGBTI who are increasingly being subjected to domestic violence. And it has become increasingly difficult for survivors of domestic violence to enforce their rights during the pandemic. So, as a result of the criminalization of women peace activists and targeted violence against women and LGBTI, women human rights defenders now have to focus all their energy to work on more pressing issues, such as the protection of women human rights defenders, supporting the women political prisoners and being in solidarity with them. Also being in solidarity with the LGBTI activists who have been harassed by the police and attacked by the government through discriminatory discourse. Pressuring the government to reverse the decision of withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention and basically defending their lives on a daily basis. So they had to shift their activities from a more peace-focused way to a reactionary way to defend their rights and protect their achievements. I am part of a research project right now that looks into peace building activities of women and LGBTI organizations in the recent years. And we haven't completed the project yet, but we have finished the interviews. And the interviews show very clearly that peace activism or peace is not even among the priorities of the groups who used to take part actively in peace building activism only a couple of years ago. And things have changed quite dramatically in this last couple of years. And this is also seen in how the activities of civil society had to change. So when we asked our interviews to tell us about what they were doing during the peace process, almost everyone referred to it as that it was so many years ago and they had difficulties to remember and they were quite happy to talk about it, but they were a bit like, oh, it's interesting we are talking about it now. Like, it's been a while that I haven't even remembered those days. It's nice to remember that we were so actively involved in peace, but we don't really talk about it anymore. We don't do anything about it anymore. And I think there are a couple of reasons. First, they always have more pressing issues and they really have to protect themselves and their movement and their organizations. This was especially stated a couple of times by Kurdish activists because they are under constant danger of being imprisoned or being attacked by the government. So they try very hard to just keep their movement going. So peace, although it is still very important and we are still in the middle of an ongoing conflict, it can't find a place in their top priorities. And another reason is that peace activism was criminalized quite a lot. So many people, just because they mentioned that we need peace, they were either imprisoned or they were like the government press charged against them. So I think it is really striking to see how peace is not even mentioned or not even remembered by the activists who used to be in the forefront of this activism, of the struggle in Turkey, and how they have to focus on different issues right now under this authoritarian context. Thank you. Women activists in Turkey also are very active on social media. I think Twitter would be the first one, and then Instagram and Facebook probably. Keeping all the international networks and ties is really, really important also to give voice to what's happening in the country, because the media doesn't really talk about what many people are facing in Turkey, not only the women activists, but the civil society in general. And when it comes to Kurdish activists, it's even worse. Many people in Turkey wouldn't know about what's really going on in terms of the Kurdish civil society. So I think international connections and international platforms are really important to kind of spread the word. But also, especially when it comes to peace-related activities or projects, it's really difficult to find any funding to continue what the NGOs or initiatives, it doesn't have to be an established NGO, but initiative or organizations, it's really crucial to have that funding to continue implementing peace-related projects. But because peace is not seen to be that relevant anymore, it's really difficult to have access to those fundings as well. So I think it's one of the things that maybe not the international women's movement, but at least to push like the bigger donors who used to support this type of activism in Turkey, but who seem to not care about it anymore. So it's important to keep that pressure on international institutions like EU or other organizations.